Previously on Game of Thrones. Wrong show. Welcome to the Terran web series. We're going to be taking a look at a TvT game from Innovation's stream where he goes for a interesting mech style. Yay. So, without further ado, let's hop into the game. Boom. I really like this build from Innovation. He starts off with a Reaper opener and transitions into kind of a heavy pressure build. He makes a lot of Hellions. He makes a Raven and a Viking force, so he does a 2-base Blue Flame Hellion / Viking attack before taking a relatively late 3rd base. It's not a super fast one. It's at about 8 to 9 minute mark, but it's not super late either. And his mid to late game transition into his army composition involves a pretty interesting choice. He goes for a very Viking light fleet. Normally we see mech armies try to compete for the sky, but what Innovation does is he surrenders the sky altogether in favor of more harassment, which I think is a very interesting concept. And basically the only anti-air he has is a Thor. One Thor, and perhaps a couple turrets if he is able to get them down. So he's not going to be completely countered by Banshees, but more on that later. This is the beginning stages of the game. So, Innovation, he is scouting with his SCV. I think it's important to scout with your SCV every time you go for a Reaper expand on 4-player maps, because you need to know where your opponent is. And if you scout in one position with your SCV and just send your Reaper the other way, you can find your opponent a lot faster. Your SCV doesn't even have to go to the cross positions because the Reaper will be able to get there in time. One thing Innovation does, it's a small variation to this otherwise normal Reaper expand, where you make 2 Reapers and then a factory, a starport, and a reactor on the barracks, and then make some Marines for early anti-air defense / just regular defense in general. Innovation, he makes a 3rd Reaper upon seeing that his opponent is going for a Reaper as well. So Innovation, he scouts the Reaper, and that's going to prompt him to build a 3rd Reaper, which I think is pretty smart, because if you build a reactor after 2 Reapers, you could potentially die to a double Reaper build, but since Innovation is making a 3rd Reaper, he's going to have a high enough Reaper count to keep him alive until his Hellion can pop out, and then he's going to transition into a reactor on the barracks and add some Marines. And then his mid game is going to involve, he's going to send his the Marines to do a small drop to kind of scout what his opponent is doing. I really like what Innovation does. What was I going to say? Sorry, it's been a long day. I just kind of zoned out there. One thing to note is that Innovation knows that this is the same both of these players are doing the same exact build. Notice how the other player, he lost a Reaper, Innovation lost a Reaper, and the Reaper count is still even, so the other player also went for a 3rd Reaper based on the fact that Innovation could have been going for a 2 Rax Reaper expand. So that's why that's the reason for the 3rd Reaper. But I already went over that. Sorry, now I'm just becoming repetitive. But I really want to do this game today because it was a pretty cool game, and I haven't done any games in TvT mech, and I think this is a particularly cool way to play out this matchup. It involves a more aggressive style with double medvac harassment, and it just the lack of Vikings is really what intrigues me as well. So right now, Innovation, there's like some stuff, he has a lot of different kind of techniques that he uses to utilize his actions per minute and utilize the interface that I don't quite know how to explain without pausing it and then having to go over the game again, which is kind of hard. I guess it's just in my mind to try to get a better way to communicate it to you guys when I see it. But anyways, innovation, he's going for a double pronged attack. He doesn't really want to do damage. Obviously, the opponent has a much higher Hellion count, but innovation's drop is going to do a decent amount of damage, and this kind of drop harass would also kind of scout for a cloak banshee timing as well, but his opponent opts to go for Raven, which is the safer build to do. Innovation, he's getting his second factor. He's going to be going for a reactor because he scouted what his opponent was doing. They're both doing almost the same builds. Innovation, though, he has the advantage because his build had the dropship harassment, which killed a couple SCVs and prevented mining time. And at this level of play, simply preventing mining time and killing a couple SCVs makes the biggest difference in the world in creating and being able to create kind of small advantages that you can push towards the later game and kind of snowball in your favor. So we see here innovation, he has the Raven, he's getting one Viking, and his opponent, he's scanning as a result of not knowing what innovation is doing. Innovation, he also didn't need to scan because of the medvac drop. That medvac drop's other purpose was to scout his opponent. And I like where innovation's putting his barracks on this map. If you're going mech, I think it's a really great place to put it because it walls off that little choke area and also provides vision for incoming drops. And now we see innovation, he's taking his delayed third base because he did get a starport with a reactor on it, and he started researching blue flame before getting his third base. So this is a pretty sizable timing attack that he's doing, and he's able to handily defeat his opponent because he has the blue flame upgrade. His opponent, the opposite Terran, chose to go for earlier siege tanks. I believe he was going to be doing, or he was going to be slowly expanding. I think blue flame is much more versatile upgrade because of the mobility that the Hellions offer, as well as the additional harass potential as well. We see here innovation, he has the choice of possibly going into the natural and getting a couple more SCV kills, but he decides to instead to back up with the Hellions because he is taking his third base, and his opponent currently does not have a third base right now. So since innovations, he's playing a macro game, so there's really no need to throw away those units. We also see that he's getting a double armory as well, so he's going into pretty sizable, or he's going to be aiming towards a pretty sizable advantage, like as big as of an advantage that he can get when it comes to this mid to late game portion of the game. LOL. I can't. Oh, that was a horrible coming out of my mouth. And we see here he's also adding an engineering bay now. It's kind of interesting. I guess he didn't need to add an engineering bay earlier on because both him and his opponent were doing the same exact builds. So there was no possible way for a Banshee to come out faster. Oh, and now we see innovation. He's starting to do this drop harass, and he's not going to be building any more Vikings for the rest of the game. He initially built, I think, about 5 Vikings when he did the Blue Flame Hellion attack. But now he's just going to be building medvacs. He still has 4 Vikings for anti-hellbat drops. And he's also going to be adding turrets to really shut... Not really... Like, you don't want a ring of turrets because that's way too expensive. Innovation is floating no money right now. You just want a couple turrets to zone out the medvacs so that the Vikings have an easier time shutting down the drops. And we see here the Vikings for the other Terran player are in great position. The other Terran player has the barracks there, so he knows that if there could be drops coming. I believe he also had a couple Vikings over there too, so he essentially split his Vikings up on those sides of the map where possible drops can go in. And so that's why that drop was able to get shut down so easily. But we see innovation, he's just going to be still making these drops try to do as much damage as possible. And this Terran player, the other Terran player decided to kind of wait a bit too long to take a third base. I think he was mostly afraid of what Innovation was doing. Remember, he has limited scouting information, whereas Innovation was also being the aggressor as well, so he knows what's going on. And these hellbat drops, even though they are getting completely shut down, he knows that he is in a better economic positioning, and because of mech's defensive capabilities, he also has the third base of the other player is now just going down, whereas Innovation's third base has been mining for several minutes already. So the reason why Innovation can kind of do this, and it's marginal advantages. I mean, just the lost mining time, killing some SCVs here and there. Like he got 2 SCVs, 3 SCVs, and he delayed mining time. The mining time's the more important thing that's gonna be impacting the Terran player. And because Innovation is able to delay the other Terran player from getting a good economy, from being able to macro up very well, Innovation's comfortable enough to double expand behind this to secure an advantage that he already has, the economic advantage that he's been milking throughout the entire game. And now right here, he goes for a kind of soft contain. I don't mind this decision because he is ahead. Well, he isn't really ahead in army, but he does have a big enough siege tank count so that he can still trade very well if he's sieged up. Like right now, he's in a sieged up position. The other Terran player, he has all of these Vikings and all of these medvacs. In Innovation, he doesn't have any he doesn't have any air units whatsoever. And Innovation kind of overextended there. He did lose about 8 to 10 hellbats, and he lost like 4 medvacs, so that's why he wasn't able to win the fight. But then the other Terran player, he ends up overextending. Innovation quickly firing the tanks with his sieged up tanks. That's very important to do because the tanks are the real damage dealers and you want to get rid of them. And as a result, Innovation's able to clean that fight up pretty easily. And now Innovation, he double expands, so he's going to have 5 bases. The other player only has 4. The other player probably wasn't really macroing very well either. And as a result, the game comes to an end. Yay. So a quick overview of that game. Innovation opens up for a Reaper expand. He goes into a medevac drop with a handful of Marines that he produced. I think it would be a 6 Marine drop if the opponent didn't go for a Reaper expand, but we have to remember the counter to a Reaper expand is to make 3 Reapers. So he does that, and then he gets, after he IDs his opponent's build, he gets a Raven, and then he starts Viking production from a reactor starport, and he gets blue flame Hellions before he gets his third base. And he does a pretty good timing attack and is able to take a pretty good advantage going into the mid game as a result of getting rid of that Terran player's majority of his army and kind of containing him because the Terran player the other guy opted to go for siege tanks instead of blue flame Hellions. And then Innovation ends up doing a lot of drop harass. And although he does overextend after the harass is over, he overextends when he goes past the watchtower. The other player ends up overextending as well, and has to GG out because he loses the big gas-intensive portion of his army. So, I guess another fairly quick, straightforward video of an interesting build order if you want to do a kind of an aggressive mech style. Definitely copy this build and have fun using it on ladder, and I will see you guys all in the next video. Cheers!